I've lived in 3 houses in my life. Most people would say that's not unusual. But what happened in the first one? It followed me. Not in the way a ghost story follows you. Not in the way a nightmare fades when morning comes. This was different. This was real. And the worst part is, the people responsible weren't monsters from the dark. They were just 2 boys. My neighbor's I was 15 years old when it started. 15. Old enough to understand danger, but still young enough to believe that the world had rules. That bad things happened somewhere else. That neighbors were harmless. That the suburbs were safe. We were living in a quiet neighborhood on the edge of town. The kind of place where lawns were trimmed, driveways were clean, and nothing ever seemed to happen. My parents liked it because it was peaceful. My little brother liked it because he could ride his bike up and down the street without worrying about traffic. And I liked it because it was familiar. But there was always something off about the house next door. The house sat slightly back compared to the others. Its windows were always covered, even during the day. The grass was never cut properly. And the man who lived there, their father, was the type of person you never saw for long. Sometimes he'd be outside smoking, staring blankly down the street like he was waiting for something. Sometimes you'd hear shouting from inside late at night. But nobody ever said anything. Because that's what people do in neighborhoods like that. They ignore things. They pretend not to notice. The 2 boys who lived there were named Eric and Todd. I knew their names only because my mom had mentioned them once after reading the mailbox labels. "They have 2 boys," she'd said casually. "Eric and Todd." That was it. That was the extent of our relationship. We'd lived next door to them for years, and I could probably count the number of times we spoke on one hand. They didn't go to the same school as me. They didn't hang out outside like other kids. They didn't ride bikes. They didn't have friends over. They were just there. Like shadows, my family was moving soon. My dad had gotten a new job, and we were going to be relocating in a few months. The house was already half filled with cardboard boxes. My mom was stressed. My dad was busy. And I was trying not to think too much about leaving the only place I'd ever really known. It was during those last few months that Todd finally spoke to us. It was a Saturday afternoon. The air was warm, and the sun was starting to dip lower in the sky. Me and my little brother were outside playing basketball in the driveway, just shooting around, laughing, enjoying the kind of normal moment you don't realize you'll miss until it's gone. The ball bounced off the pavement. The hoop rattled. And then, I noticed movement from the corner of my eye. Someone was walking toward us. Slowly, deliberately. I turned. Todd was coming down his driveway. He was wearing camouflage pants and a dark hoodie even though it wasn't cold. His hands were stuffed in his pockets. His face was expressionless. My brother froze. I could feel the atmosphere change, like the air itself had tightened. Todd stopped a few feet away and stared at us for a moment before speaking. His voice was flat, almost rehearsed. "Is it true?" I blinked. "Is what true?" "That you're moving." The way he said it wasn't curious. It wasn't friendly. It was like he already knew, like he was confirming something. "Yeah," I said slowly. "In a couple months." Todd nodded once, his eyes never leaving mine. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then he tilted his head slightly. "You ever shoot guns?" I frowned. "What?" He shrugged. "Me and Eric go down by the river sometimes. In the woods." My brother shifted closer to me. Todd continued. "We shoot. Just for fun." "Oh," I said cautiously. "Like bead guns?" Todd's lips twitched. Not quite a smile. "Something like that." He paused, then added, "You should come tomorrow." The invitation felt wrong, like being asked into something you didn't understand. But I was 15, and part of me didn't want to seem scared. Part of me thought, maybe they're just awkward. Maybe this is normal. So I nodded. Sure, I guess. My brother immediately spoke up. Can I come too? Todd looked at him for a long moment. Then, almost reluctantly, yeah, and without another word, Todd turned around and walked back to his house that night. I had a strange feeling in my stomach, something like anxiety. Something like instinct. But I ignored it. Because nothing had happened yet. Because it was just two boys. Because it was broad daylight. Because the world had rules. The next evening, about an hour before dusk, the doorbell rang. My heart jumped. I looked toward the living room where my parents were watching TV. They didn't move. I rushed to the door before they could ask questions. When I opened it, Todd and Eric were standing there. And they looked different. They were dressed like soldiers. Full camouflage. Boots. Gloves. Eric had a duffel bag slung over his shoulder, and the seriousness in their eyes made my throat go dry. Todd spoke. Come on. No greeting, no small talk, just command. My brother hesitated behind me. I stepped outside, pulling the door closed quietly. We started walking. Down the sidewalk. Past the quiet houses. Past the streetlights beginning to flicker on. Todd and Eric didn't speak. Not once. The only sounds were our footsteps and the distant chirping of crickets. We reached the edge of the woods. The river was somewhere beyond the trees, hidden in the growing darkness. Todd stopped. Eric dropped the duffel bag onto the dirt with a heavy thud. My brother whispered to me, "This is weird." I nodded. Eric unzipped the bag, and that's when I saw them. Not beeb guns, not toys. Real metal, real weight, real weapons. My breath caught. Todd pulled one out and held it casually like it was nothing. Eric grabbed another, his fingers were confident. Too confident. Like he'd done this before. Todd handed one toward me. Here. I didn't take it. My voice came out tight. Those are real. Todd's eyes locked onto mine. Yeah. My brother's face had gone pale. I stepped back. Nope, we're not doing this. Eric suddenly raised his gun. And fired. The crack of the shot echoed through the woods. Birds exploded from the trees. My brother yelped. My heart slammed against my ribs. Eric fired again. And again, laughing quietly. I realized in that moment, these weren't normal kids. And we were alone. In the woods. With them, I grabbed my brother's arm. We're leaving. Todd's expression darkened. You're leaving? Yes, I snapped. This is insane. Eric lowered the gun slowly. The way he looked at me wasn't anger. It was something colder, like disappointment, like I'd ruined something. Todd stepped closer. His voice dropped. You shouldn't talk about this, I swallowed. We won't. Todd stared for a long moment, then nodded. Good. We turned and walked away quickly, trying not to run. Behind us, I heard Eric mutter something. A curse, a laugh. And then silence. That night. I thought it was over. I thought we'd just had a creepy encounter. I thought we'd go home, move away, forget about it. I didn't understand that I had just stepped into something much darker. Because the real horror wasn't the guns, it wasn't the woods. It was what came later. When Todd decided I knew too much. I didn't sleep that night. Not properly. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to every sound the house made. The pipes creaking, the distant hum of the refrigerator, my brother's soft breathing from the room across the hall. And beneath all of it, that memory, the weight of those guns, the way Eric held them like they were toys, the way Todd's voice dropped when he said, "You shouldn't talk about this." It wasn't a suggestion. It was a warning. The next morning, I told myself I was being dramatic. They were just stupid kids. Maybe their dad hunted. Maybe they stole the guns. Maybe it was just teenage stupidity. But deep down, something felt wrong. Not boys being boys wrong. Something darker. Something intentional. At breakfast, my mom noticed I was quiet. "You okay?" "Yeah," I lied quickly. My dad barely looked up from his coffee. My brother didn't say a word. He just kept staring at his cereal bowl like it might swallow him. He was scared, and that scared me more than anything. That entire day, I avoided the windows. Every time I passed the front of the house, I felt like someone was watching, and maybe that was paranoia. Until the evening. It was around 9 p.m. My parents were in the living room watching a movie. My brother was already in bed. I was in my room, headphones on, trying to distract myself with music. My room was on the first floor. The window faced the side yard, the narrow space between our house and Todd's. There wasn't much there, just grass, a fence, and darkness. At some point, I paused my music. I don't even remember why. Maybe instinct. Maybe some part of my brain noticed something my ears hadn't yet understood. Silence. The kind of silence that feels heavy. I sat up slightly. Then I heard it, a soft sound, like gravel shifting. Outside, right near my window, I froze. My eyes drifted slowly toward the curtains. The blinds were half closed, but not fully. I could see a thin slice of the yard outside. Just darkness. I held my breath. And then, movement. A shadow passed through the slice of light. Slow. Careful. Someone was out there. My heart began pounding so hard I thought it would give me away. I stared, waiting, hoping it was nothing. A cat, a raccoon, anything. Then, a face appeared, right in the gap between the blinds. Todd. His pale skin looked almost blue in the moonlight. His eyes were wide, unblinking. He was so close his breath fogged the glass. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. My entire body locked up. We stared at each. Seconds passed. Then Todd's mouth slowly opened, not to speak, not to scream, just to smile. A slow, unnatural smile. Then he lifted one finger and pressed it against his lips. Shh. My stomach dropped. My hands went numb. I couldn't even scream. I couldn't even breathe. Because Todd wasn't outside yelling. He wasn't knocking. He wasn't playing around. He was whispering, like he was already inside my world, like the glass between us meant nothing. I jerked backward, hitting my desk. The chair scraped loudly. Todd's smile widened. He leaned closer. Then, I saw something in his hand. A small dark shape, metal. My eyes focused, and my blood turned to ice. A pistol. Not raised, not pointed yet, just held casually, like a reminder, like a message. I can. I stumbled away from the window. My voice finally came out as a broken whisper. Dad. But my dad couldn't hear me. The movie in the living room was too loud. Todd tapped the glass once, a gentle knock, then twice, then 3 times. Each tap felt like a countdown. Then Todd mouthed something. I couldn't hear it, but I could read his lips. Don't say anything. Suddenly, footsteps behind him. Another shadow stepped forward. Eric. Eric's face was half hidden by the darkness, but I could see the grin. He leaned in close to Todd's ear and whispered something. Todd chuckled. A silent laugh. Then Eric raised his hand and dragged one finger slowly across his throat. A cutting gesture. My lungs collapsed. I backed up until my shoulders hit the wall. I was shaking. Todd tilted his head, studying me, like I was an animal in a cage. Then, finally, he stepped back. Eric followed. They disappeared into the darkness, just like that. I stood there for a full minute, frozen, waiting for them to come back, waiting for the window to shatter, waiting for the gunshot. But nothing happened. Only silence. The worst kind. Because now I knew. They weren't just weird. They weren't just dangerous. They were enjoying this. I ran into the living room so fast I almost tripped. My mom looked up, startled. "What's wrong?" I opened my mouth. The words were right there. Todd was at my window. He had a gun. Call the police. But Todd's lips flashed in my mind. "Don't say anything." Eric's throat/gesture. My brother asleep down the hall. The thought of retaliation. My voice died. I thought I heard something outside. My dad sighed. "It's probably a raccoon. Go to bed." My mom gave me a tired smile. "Stop scaring yourself. Stop scaring myself." I nodded and walked back to my room. That night, I pushed my dresser in front of the window. I locked my door. I lay in bed staring into the darkness. And every time the house creaked, I imagined Todd's face in the blinds again. His finger to his lips. That whisper. Shh. The next day at school, I couldn't focus. I couldn't breathe normally. Every shadow felt wrong. Every hallway felt too narrow, because now I understood something horrifying. Todd and Eric knew where I lived. They knew my room. They knew my fear. And they had all the time in the world. Until we moved. But the worst part, I thought that was the peak. I thought window stalking was as bad as it could get. I didn't know, that soon, they wouldn't stay outside the glass. After that night, I stopped opening my curtains. I stopped sleeping normally. I stopped feeling safe inside my own room. Because once someone stands outside your window with a gun, your brain never forgets. Your house doesn't feel like a house anymore. It feels like a thin wooden box, a place someone can enter whenever they want. The next few days were torture. Todd and Eric didn't approach me in daylight. They didn't talk to me at school. They didn't shout insults across the yard. Nothing. Just silence. And somehow, that silence was worse. Because silence meant planning. Every night I watched their house from my bed, just a crack through the blinds. Sometimes I saw movement, a curtain shifting, a face, always watching, always waiting. They weren't doing this for revenge anymore. They were doing it because they enjoyed it. I didn't tell my parents. Not yet, and I hated myself for it. But fear does that. Fear turns you into a prisoner inside your own head. Then came the night I realized Todd wasn't just trying to scare me. He was testing boundaries. It was a Friday. My dad had fallen asleep on the couch. My mom was upstairs. My brother was in his room, clutching a stuffed animal even though he was too old for it. And I was awake. Of course I was awake. I always was. Around 2:13 a.m., I heard something. Not outside. Not the yard. Inside the house. A sound so small I almost thought I imagined it. A soft click. I sat up instantly, my heart already racing. I listened. Nothing. Just the hum of the heater. Then, another sound. Metal. A faint rattle. Like someone touching something they shouldn't. I slowly slid out of bed, bare feet on cold wood. I moved toward my bedroom door. My hand hovered over the knob. I didn't want to open it. But I had to know. I pressed my ear against the door. Silence. Then, a sound that made my stomach drop out of my body. A gentle twist. Right outside. The handle was moving. I froze. My brain screamed, "Someone is trying to open your door." The handle turned again. Slow. Careful. Like whoever was out there didn't want to make noise. Like they knew everyone was asleep. Like they knew exactly what they were doing. I backed away. My breath came out in short, panicked bursts. Then, the handle stopped. For a moment everything was still, and I thought, maybe it was my brother, maybe it was my mom, maybe I was losing my mind. Then I heard it, a whisper, right against the wood. Todd's voice. Soft. Amused. "Tim." My blood turned to ice. He knew my name. He was right there. On the other side. Inside my house. My legs almost gave out. I stumbled backward until I hit my desk. My mind spun. How? How was he inside? The windows were blocked. The doors were locked. My parents, oh God, my parents were downstairs asleep. My brother was across the hall. Todd was in the hallway. Between us, the handle turned again. Harder this time. The latch rattled. Todd whispered again. You should have kept quiet. Then, a second voice. Eric. Low and angry. Open it. Open it. Open it. Like this was a game. Like I was supposed to let them in. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands. My thumb hovered over 911, but then Todd spoke again. And what he said made my entire body go numb. If you call anyone, a pause, a smile in his voice. We'll start with your little brother. I covered my mouth to stop myself from making a sound. Tears burned my eyes. My brother. They knew. They knew exactly how to control me. The handle stopped moving. Then, footsteps. Slow steps down the hallway. Away from my door, toward my brother's room. No. I moved without thinking. I yanked my door open, and the hallway was empty. Dark. Silent. But I could hear it. A faint creak. Near my brother's door. Someone was there. I sprinted across the hall and threw myself in front of his door like a shield. My brother stirred inside. I didn't answer. My eyes scanned the darkness. Then I saw them. Two shapes. At the far end of the hallway. Near the staircase. Todd and Eric. Both standing there. Watching. Todd's face was barely visible, but his grin was. Always that grin. Eric lifted something in his hand, a small metallic glint. A knife? A gun? I couldn't tell. I didn't want to. Todd whispered loudly enough for me to hear. Good boy. Then he raised his finger to his lips again. Shh. And then, they turned, and quietly walked back down the stairs. Like they belonged there. Like my house was theirs. I stood shaking in the hallway for what felt like hours. My entire body screaming. Finally, I forced myself to move. I crept downstairs. Every step felt like walking into my own execution. The front door was closed. Locked, the back door too. No broken windows. No forced entry. Nothing. And yet they had been inside. That morning I didn't go to school. I told my parents I felt sick. Which wasn't a lie. I was sick with terror. My mom touched my forehead. No fever. My dad frowned. You sure you're okay? I stared at him. I wanted to tell him everything. But Todd's voice echoed. We'll start with your little brother. So I swallowed the truth. Again, later that day, I looked out the window toward Todd's house. And there he was, standing behind his curtain, watching me. He lifted his hand slowly and tapped the glass. Once, twice, 3 times. A countdown. A promise. They weren't going to stop. They weren't going to get bored. They were escalating. Testing how far they could go. Before someone snapped. Before someone died. And the worst part? We still had 1 week left before moving. 1 week. In a house that no longer felt like ours. The next night, sleep was impossible. My heart pounded every time a floorboard creaked. Every shadow felt alive. Every whisper of wind against the window sounded like Todd's voice saying, shh. I didn't go near the blinds. I didn't go near the windows. I barely breathed. Around 1:45 a.m., I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, when I heard it. A soft creak. Downstairs. From the basement. The door. I knew the basement door. It was locked. It had been locked since we moved in. And now, it was open. I froze instantly. My stomach flipped. Every muscle in my body screamed at me to run. I didn't. I couldn't. Because my parents were asleep. My brother was asleep. If I made a noise, if I tried to call out, they could be killed. I silently inched toward my door, heart pounding like a drum, ears straining for the smallest sound. The basement door creaked again. Slow, methodical. Someone had entered it. And I knew it was Todd, Eric. Both. I couldn't see. I didn't dare move closer, but I could hear them. Whispers, laughing softly, footsteps against the cold concrete, the scrape of something metallic. I thought about calling 911, then remembered their threat. We'll start with your little brother. And the last thing I wanted was my brother getting hurt. I grabbed the baseball bat under my bed, every nerve in my body screaming. I edged toward the stairs, listening, trying to make a plan. Then I heard a new sound, something I'd never heard before, a soft shuffle, followed by a low hum. Todd was singing, quietly, softly, in a tone that was almost playful. I realized then, this wasn't just about fear. This was about control. This was their game. I wasn't allowed to leave my bed. I wasn't allowed to move freely. I was their puppet. And they were enjoying it. I slowly crept back toward my desk, clutching the bat like it could protect me. The basement door opened wider. The light from the small bulb inside spilled faintly into the hallway. I saw shadows moving, small, quick shadows. I couldn't make out who it was. I only knew they were down there, and they could come up any second. Hours passed. Minutes felt like centuries. I didn't move. I didn't breathe properly. I didn't blink. Then, finally, silence. The basement door closed slowly. The light vanished. Everything was still. I didn't dare sleep. I didn't dare move. I just lay there, waiting, watching. The next morning I saw the door was closed, locked, as if no one had ever entered. But I knew. I could feel it in my bones. They had been there. They had touched my house. They had walked through my life without permission. And worst of all, they weren't done. Later that day, I overheard my parents talking in the kitchen. I couldn't focus. Couldn't eat. Couldn't sit still. I had to know what was going on, so I snuck to the window facing Todd's house. And there he was, watching, silent, patient, waiting, like a predator. And I realized, 1 week until we moved, and every night from now on would be hell. I didn't sleep again that night. I didn't go near the basement. I didn't leave my bed. And every time the wind blew, every time the house creaked, I could hear Todd whisper, "Shh." By now, I knew the only way to survive was to anticipate, to prepare, to fight, mentally, because Todd and Eric weren't normal. They weren't children anymore. They were monsters hiding behind familiar faces. And they were coming for me that night. Something changed. The air felt heavier, like the house itself was holding its breath. My parents were asleep. My brother was asleep. And I was wide awake. Because deep down, I knew Todd and Eric weren't coming to scare me anymore. They were coming to finish something. At exactly 2:13 a.m., I heard it. A tap. Not downstairs. Not outside. Right at my window. 3 slow taps. Tap, tap, tap. My blood turned to ice. I didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't even blink. Then, a whisper. So soft it was almost inside my head. "Open it, Todd." I squeezed my eyes shut. Maybe it wasn't real. Maybe I was dreaming. Then the tapping came again. Harder, more impatient. Bang, bang. And then, the voice changed. Eric's voice. Low, angry. "Don't make us come in," I wanted to scream. I wanted to run to my parents. But fear glued me in place. Because I remembered what Todd said. "We'll start with your little brother." I slowly turned my head toward the window. The curtain was slightly open, just enough to see a shape outside. 2 silhouettes, standing perfectly still. One of them raised something long and dark, a rifle, pointed directly at my room. I couldn't stop shaking. Todd leaned closer to the glass. His face emerged into the faint streetlight, and he smiled. Not a normal smile. A smile that said, "This is fun." He mouthed something. I couldn't hear it, but I understood. "Come outside." I couldn't. So Todd's smile faded, and his eyes became empty, like something switched off inside him. He lifted his hand and knocked on the glass again. This time, gently, like he was knocking on a coffin. Then, Eric laughed. A sharp, ugly laugh. And suddenly, a rock smashed against the window. Crack. The glass spiderwebbed instantly. I screamed. I couldn't hold it back anymore. My dad's voice thundered from down the hall. What the hell was that? Footsteps. Lights flicking on. My mother shouting. My brother crying. Todd and Eric didn't run. They didn't panic. They just stood there, watching, like they wanted my family awake, like they wanted them to see. My dad burst into my room. What happened? I pointed at the window, choking on air. There, outside, my dad yanked the curtain back. And there they were. Two boys, guns in their hands, smiling. My dad froze. For a second, he didn't know what he was seeing. Then Eric lifted the rifle slightly, almost like a salute. Todd waved, a slow, mocking wave. My dad shouted, "Get off my property." Todd tilted his head, like a curious animal. Then he shouted back. Or what? My father grabbed the phone. He dialed. Police. His hands shaking. Todd's grin widened. He leaned toward Eric and whispered something. Eric nodded. And then, they raised their guns. Not at me. Not at my dad. But at the house. At the windows. At the walls. Like they wanted to remind us. We were trapped inside glass. And glass breaks. My mother screamed. My brother sobbed. My dad stood between us and the window like his body could stop bullets. And Todd's eyes locked onto mine. Pure hatred. Pure amusement. And he whispered through the glass. This is what happens when you don't listen. Then, sirens. Faint at first. Growing louder. Todd's smile finally faltered. Eric muttered, "Cops." Todd stared at me one last time, and in that stare was a promise. Not a threat. A promise. "We'll be back." They turned and vanished into the darkness. No footsteps, no running, just swallowed by night. The police arrived minutes later. Flashlights, questions. My father shouting, my mother shaking. Me standing there like a corpse. But when officers went next door, Todd and Eric's house was dark, silent, empty. No answer, no movement. Like nobody lived there at all. That was the moment I realized something terrifying. These weren't normal kids. Normal kids would hide. Normal kids would be scared. Todd and Eric were fearless because they didn't think of consequences. They didn't think of life. They thought of power. And we were just their entertainment. The officer told my dad, "We'll keep an eye on the area," but I knew. The police would leave, and Todd would still be right next door, watching, waiting. And with only 1 week left until we moved, I understood one thing clearly. The next few nights would decide whether we survived. The week crawled by like a living nightmare. Every night Todd and Eric escalated their terror. It started with whispers through the walls, then footsteps outside the door. Then, small objects left on the porch, a broken toy, a piece of rope, a single glove, things that didn't belong to anyone. Messages, warnings, toys that belonged to no one but somehow, our lives. By the 5th night, I couldn't sleep at all. I lay on the floor beside my brother's bed. Baseball bat in my hands. Every creak, every shift in the house, every distant noise felt like Todd and Eric were testing the locks, the walls, the doors, watching. And then, the basement door creaked. I didn't dare look. I grabbed my brother and whispered, "They're here. Stay quiet." He shook, eyes wide, gripping my hand. We heard soft, slow footsteps upstairs. Then, a shadow passed across the top of the stairs. Todd's silhouette. Lean, silent, menacing. He paused, then spoke, just a whisper. Packing? Don't forget us. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But my dad had already barricaded the front door. And my mom? Frozen, staring at the shadows with disbelief. We all knew. This was not a prank, not a game. This was real. Minutes felt like hours. Then, silence. The shadow moved away. Gone. And I felt a fleeting sense of relief. The next morning, moving day. Everything packed. Boxes stacked. U-Haul truck waiting. I glanced at Todd and Eric's house one last time. And there they were, standing in the driveway, watching, not waving, not smiling, just watching. My father noticed them and whispered, "Don't look back, just get in the truck." We obeyed. Slowly, carefully, hearts pounding. The engine roared to life. We pulled out. As we turned the corner, my brother whispered, "Do you think they'll follow us?" I didn't answer, because deep down I knew. Todd and Eric didn't need cars. They didn't need roads. They existed in our shadows, in our windows, in our heads. Days later, I tried to convince myself it was over. It wasn't. Boxes unpacked, rooms arranged, normal life attempted. Until I noticed it. A small note slipped under our new mailbox. Neatly folded, written in childish handwriting. One word. Shh. I threw it away. I thought about calling the police. I didn't. Because Todd and Eric had already won. They didn't just scare us. They taught us a lesson. A lesson we would never forget. And sometimes, late at night, when the wind hits my window just right, I can still hear it. A whisper, soft and deliberate. Shh.